So let's move on. Welcome to our global webinar series for Philips today. And we will be talking about tinnitus management, which is slowly becoming more commonly available in today's hearing aid clinics. So in our own way, we really want to support you in providing this valuable service to your client. And I'm not sure about you, but back then, whenever I get clients coming in complaining about tinnitus, my initial response was anxiety, to be honest, because anything can happen when it comes to dealing with a client suffering from tinnitus, as most of you know. You can get a really easygoing client who are not so bothered by their tinnitus. But on the other end, you can also get a really neurotic client who's constantly anxious, stressed, asking a million and one questions about their tinnitus. And I think that's quite overwhelming from time to time. There are many procedures and proposed treatments out there, but first, we need to clarify something before we continue and talk about the rest of the slides. And that is, it is not your job to provide a thorough tinnitus assessment or treatment protocol unless you're especially trained to do so. So don't put this pressure on yourself, because if the tinnitus is caused by a medical issue, like an impacted cerumen, eustachian tube dysfunction, Meniere's, or some kind of vascular issues like an aneurysm, that's an ENT doctor's area. And if you get a client who is severely affected emotionally and mentally by their tinnitus, refer this to a psychologist or a psychiatrist who can do cognitive behavioral therapy. You can, of course, provide a professional tinnitus assessment. And if you are qualified to do so, by all means, you are free to do that. For some clinics, they really specialize in tinnitus assessments. So you get to assess for the pitch and the loudness of the tinnitus. You can assess for the loudness discomfort level and even the minimum masking level. And if you offer that in your clinic, that's great, because measuring the tinnitus is also very reassuring for the client. And it would also give you an idea whether sound therapy or hearing aids could be helpful or not. What the rest of us can do, though, is to provide correct information regarding tinnitus, to provide reassurance, hope, and even, well, basically counseling. We can tell them that tinnitus is really common, that for most people, it actually becomes less noticeable over time, and that there are many techniques to help them distract and calm their tinnitus. So instead of telling them there is no cure for tinnitus, that's quite negative, right? Why don't we try to adopt a more positive tone, that tinnitus can be caused by many different things, which is why the solution is highly individual, and we'll try our best to find it. And as hearing care professionals, in addition to providing information and emotional reassurance, of course, another thing you can do is to fit hearing aids. And that's what we're going to focus on for the next hour or so. So today we're going to talk about how tinnitus sound support works in Philips HearLink, along with optimal amplification. Both of these can definitely provide a great combined solution to people who are suffering from hearing loss and also tinnitus. We'll also talk about the sound options available in tinnitus sound support, and this offers a customizable range of relief sounds and how to put this in action using HearSuite and the HearLink 2 app. Then we will follow up with a question and answer portion. And we also prepared some fun trivia for you guys to see, and we can also check how many of these questions you can answer. So tinnitus is the perception of sound in the ears or head where no external source is actually present. It is commonly described as this ringing in the ears, and it can take a variety of different forms. It could be ringing, buzzing, humming, whistling. And in fact, tinnitus affects more than 740 million adults worldwide. And although tinnitus is not so common in the general population, it's actually very common in the people that we see because normally they also have hearing loss, which is why 90% of clients with tinnitus also have some kind of hearing loss. And that's why it's pretty common in our clinic and we have to deal with it, right? And one of the many safe and effective and non-invasive treatment strategies for tinnitus is sound therapy. So the purpose of sound therapy is to reduce the perception of tinnitus loudness and the client's reaction to the tinnitus using sound. And when I say sound, it can include something as simple as turning on background music in a quiet room, or turning on the fan, or listening to a radio or a podcast, as it's more popular these days, or even just going out for a walk on a windy day. And if your client has a hearing loss, of course, it makes sense to expose them to the sounds they are missing out on by using hearing aids. And in addition to amplification of external sounds, combination devices such as the one you see in this slide also provides additional relief sounds. And with these two strategies, that includes amplification and relief sounds, these combination devices can actually reduce the tinnitus perception by moving the focus away from this perceived tinnitus in their head. Now let's talk about the things we can do with tinnitus sound support in Philips HearLink. So every person with tinnitus is unique and has different needs. To ensure the best management for each client, tinnitus sound support includes 7 different tinnitus relief sounds, which can be customized with ease in the Philips HearSuite and of course by the client with their HearLink 2 app. Tinnitus sound support is available for all HearLink 40 and HearLink 50 hearing aids as long as they have 2 things: NFMI, near field magnetic induction, and a push button. Basically, the push button is necessary because it gives the user control over their relief sounds, whether you want to turn it on or off, or just adjust the volume. And of course, we also need the NFMI because it allows the relief sounds to binaurally sync. And also, it can be adjusted by the user using the push button. According to experts, sound therapy can actually be used 3 ways to help manage tinnitus. So first, as a masking sound. And this masking effect reduces this contrast of the tinnitus in one's listening environment, thereby promoting habituation. The second is that sound therapy can be used as a relaxing sound to decrease stress and anxiety of the tinnitus client. And then lastly, sound therapy can be used as a distracting sound to divert their attention away from the tinnitus more towards the external environment. And I can tell you based on research and from my own personal experience that fitting the hearing aids with amplification alone will usually provide tinnitus relief for a lot of patients. And this is because amplification makes the ambient noises audible. So in a sense, hearing aids can be considered as a type of sound therapy because they amplify external sounds and divert the attention away from the perception of the tinnitus. And of course, there will be some tinnitus clients who may require more targeted sound therapy from their hearing aids instead of just relying on amplification alone, which is why we have tinnitus sound support. So let's see what it has to offer. Tinnitus sound support offers a range of tinnitus relief sounds. So we have 4 broadband relief sounds, which is white, pink, red, and shape to audiogram sounds. We also have 3 soothing, ocean-like relief sounds, which can be customized and fine-tuned by you according to what your client needs and prefer. And it can also be further customized by the client with the Philips HearLink 2 app for that extra control. So the first broadband relief sound is shaped to audiogram, which basically takes the individual audiogram of your client into account. And this is the default option when you turn on Tinnitus sound support. So there's a carefully pre-calculated sound level, which is a good starting point for you to adjust the volume of the tinnitus relief sound. Okay. Then you have the white sound, which is a broadband signal with a more flat spectrum, and you have the pink and the red sounds, which offer additional broadband sound options, which reduce the high frequency by 3 and by 6 dB per octave, respectively. So the most common sound in tinnitus therapy is actually white noise, especially with the older treatment protocols. And this is basically a broadband signal with a flat spectrum, as you can see in the picture. This is represented by an equal amount of energy for each frequency, hence it's flat. And basically it sounds like static noise heard on the radio or the shh sound. Okay, for the pink noise, it's also a broadband sound. And the main difference with the pink noise is that it reduces by 3 dB the higher the frequency goes. So compared to the stronger sound coming from the white noise, pink noise may be more tolerable for patients with mild to moderate hearing loss. And then finally, we have red noise. And it's also a broadband signal that has more energy in the lower frequencies compared to pink noise. So all 4 of these broadband relief sounds are actually steady state sounds, which means they stay the same. They don't really vary. But the good news is you can actually change the modulation based on the preferences and needs of your client. And there are currently 5 modulation options, from off to tranquil, eventually increasing the modulation all the way towards bustling. These options can be adjusted in the software and, of course, with the app. And in addition to the 4 broadband sounds, Tinnitus also offers 3 different soothing ocean sounds. In general, ocean sounds are actually pretty popular also in tinnitus management because they're quite dynamic, but still soothing. And these sounds has the effect on distracting the client from their tinnitus, in addition to giving this overall relaxing effect. So the 3 ocean sounds you will hear in the next slides are basically the modulated versions of the white, pink, and red noise to mimic this ocean rhythm. Personally, my favorite is a third, but try listening for yourself. Okay, so when you turn the tinnitus sound support on, the relief sounds will be synchronized to offer the same relief signal to both ears. And this ensures that the relief sounds are presented in phase and that the clients will basically receive a more balanced sound perception from the relief sounds. And of course, this is really important when the sounds are modulated. For example, if you choose ocean and it's not synchronized between the 2 ears, this will definitely cause a lot of discomfort. And that's why it's very important that they're synchronized. And another option you can customize in Tinnitus sound support is the automatic level steering, which can be activated or deactivated in Philips HearSuite. So with this feature, the volume of the relief sounds basically adjusts automatically without the clients needing to adjust the level of the relief sounds by themselves. And this is how it works. So when the environmental sound is high, the tinnitus relief sound is less needed because the environmental sounds themselves are actually loud enough to provide relief from the tinnitus. And for this reason, when the environment is actually louder than 50 dB SPL, automatic level steering basically decreases the level of the tinnitus relief sound. And this reduction is 1-to-1, meaning with 1 dB decrease of relief sound for each 1 dB increase in the environmental sound with a maximum decrease of 10 dB. So in that way, this feature makes sure that the relief sound does not interfere with normal speech. And in the case when the environmental sound, background sound is more quiet again, then the relief sound will return back to normal. And this will be more apparent to the client. And we've talked about synchronization. We've talked about automatic level steering so far. Now let's talk about volume control. So the volume of the relief sound can be controlled independently from the amplification in the hearing aid. The loudness level can be monaurally or binaurally adjusted. That is, either you adjust it independently or on both ears. And finally, if you want to adjust the volume of the relief sound, you can use the hearing aid push buttons. And if you want to adjust the volume of the hearing aid amplification, then the client can use the app, the remote control, or even the audio clip to adjust that. So with that, I would like to now hand the next slide to Christina, who will be talking more about the practical aspects of how to fit using the tinnitus SoundSupport. Over to you.
Marielle, thank you very much. I just need a bit more light, make it a bit more bright. Thank you so much, Marielle. So now we would like to talk a bit about the more technical part or practical part. Marielle gave a really nice introduction about tinnitus, what we must consider, what's important to know for tinnitus clients. And now let's look actually a few rules or considerations when fitting tinnitus clients, and also really a few steps how to actually use tinnitus SoundSupport in the software. Because we have not introduced tinnitus SoundSupport for Philips for a long time, so I'm not quite sure if you have had the opportunity to work with tinnitus clients. Therefore, I think it does not harm if we also quickly then go through the software. So, but let's start with a few tips, general tips, or a few principles which are not difficult to remember, but they are very, very important, are very, very helpful for tinnitus client. For clients suffering tinnitus, we always recommend that the open fitting is the very best solution. What also Marielle mentioned before, it is very important to optimize the naturalness of the sound, because sounds of the environment help already to take the focus away. More open fittings provide direct access to audible environmental sounds while amplifying inaudible speech information. It is therefore recommended to use the most open fitting that the client hearing loss actually permits. Well, we know sometimes because of the hearing loss, you need to make a bit more closed fitting, maybe to use a bit more closed ventilation. So if occluding ear molds or domes are required to match the amplification target, then these more occluded fitting should be considered. Of course, this is the first priority if the client needs amplification also to match the hearing loss. However, you as the hearing care professional, you must be aware that a closed sensation from occlusion can make the perception of tinnitus worse. So if occlusion worsens the tinnitus perception, then a more open fitting should be considered, or let's say we must find the balance between the occlusion effect and the reduced perception of tinnitus. Another rule or another recommendation is that binaural fitting is always the best solution. We generally recommend binaural fitting for a bilateral hearing loss, even if tinnitus is only perceived on one side, because this helps to provide more normal auditory balance, and it also helps to stimulate the entire auditory system. If the hearing loss is only on one side, unilateral, but the tinnitus is also perceived on one side only, still binaural hearing aids can be fitted. But then the amplification should only be on the side where actually the client has the hearing loss. There are moments when the client has a very bothersome tinnitus and other signs of distress, and there are moments maybe when the tinnitus perception is not that strong. So it's great to have a tinnitus program which the client can activate when he needs it. And if he does not feel the tinnitus bothersome, or if he does not feel that he needs a relief, then he does not need to use the tinnitus program. Therefore, we also recommend the creation of separate tinnitus program, maybe one with a different sound or with a different modulation. This offers great flexibility if the client maybe has a changing tinnitus, a different sound or different strength. So then actually the client can select the program which would help him most. Because continuous activation of tinnitus sound support is not required throughout the day, but really only in situations when the client really needs it. Tinnitus intervention is unique to each person. It is not an easy task to work with tinnitus clients, but also tinnitus sound support or use of hearing aids, as Marielle already explained, can really be beneficial to the client and help reducing the tinnitus perception. Now let's look at the 3 technical steps, what we actually need to consider when we do fit tinnitus sound support in Philips HearSuite. First, we need to prepare for tinnitus sound support. Then we need to present all the different sound options which we have available to find out which sound is most comfortable for the client or which sound is most acceptable. And then we can activate the remote control or also the microphone in the hearing instrument. So basically, there are 3 main steps what we would like to look at now. Marielle also mentioned in the presentation where she introduced the 4 different broadband sounds that the shaped to audiogram would be the default sound. So if you do not select a special or a different sound, then the default to audiogram would pop up. You do have the possibility, if you frequently work with tinnitus sound support and if you frequently use a different sound as the first sound, then you do have the possibility in preferences to actually activate the default sound which you use most frequently. And this you can do here in preferences, tinnitus sound support, and here you can activate the sounds which you use most frequently. Or you can also here in the icon, in the preference icon, click right on the icon, then the tinnitus menu will open and is there where you can set the preference of the sound which you use most frequently. Since we also normally use amplification in the hearing aid, in the very first place, when we work with tinnitus sound support, we need to fit the hearing aid to the client's audiogram as we would do for any other client. So normally we would do this on program number 1, on the first program, and then on the second program, we would activate a tinnitus program, which the client can use whenever needed. So when we have selected the program where we would like to have the tinnitus sound support, then actually we click on Activate Tinnitus Sound Support. And then we immediately already see the default program, which may be shaped to audiogram, or the program which you have changed in preferences will actually popping up. And now this is where you must very, very closely work with your client. This is where you, as a hearing care professional, get to know the client, and you must really feel how he feels, you know, what is important for him, what sound is acceptable, what sound is comfortable. So after you have activated tinnitus sound support, then the default sound actually will pop up. And now what you must do, you start presenting one sound to your client, then see how he feels, if it's comfortable, if it feels pleasant, if it feels good. Then actually you need to go to the second one, maybe set the white sound, then go to the pink, go to the red. So basically what you should do in order to find out, present each sound or each noise of the tinnitus sound support to your client. Let it play for a moment to find out which actually sound is comfortable. And I assume your client will react immediately, you know, either negative or positive, so that you can quite easily find out which client actually your customer preferred. If necessary, you can also fine-tune the sound here with the fitting bands. But we would recommend, as a very, very first step, you should find out which of the sound of the 4 broadband sound your client actually prefers. Play it again until you really decide on which program you are going to use. And then if you have decided that the client prefers maybe the shape to audiogram because it sounds almost the same level across all the frequency, then you can still start to fine-tune the sounds in the different fitting bands, because all these fitting bands, up to 16 fitting bands, are available for you. Now, once you have selected the sound which your client prefers, now we can also add the modulation. We have seen that each broadband sound can have a different rhythm, and it has also, research has also revealed that tinnitus clients very, very often, or most likely, prefer a sound which changes the rhythm over time, which is not a static sound. So then you can open the modulation pattern to see the modulation, and there we do have 4 different rhythms which you can try and present. So there is the rhythm with the slowest rhythm would actually be the tranquil. The tranquil is a very mild modulation for a client who wants only a slight level variation with a very, very low speed. And then the second, be a bit stronger, would be mild. It's a bit faster modulation, but still a bit on the calm side. So for a client who prefers modulation but does not want too much, changes to happen in the sound. Then we also do have spirited. This is a clearly audible modulation, but still not too aggressive. So this would be ideal for a client who likes modulation and he really wants to hear something happening with his tinnitus noise. And then last and not least, we do have the bustling. The bustling is really, really a very, very strongly modulated signal and is very, very a lively signal. So this would be ideal for clients who really, really want to hear the modulation change strongly across the sound. So now the modulation can be selected here in HearSuite, but then in the end, if the client uses the app, he also has the possibility to adapt or modify the modulation in his HearLink app. We are going to talk about this in a moment. Marielle also talked about the automatic steering levels. So here is actually where would activate the automatic steering level. This is this automatic volume control, which would increase or decrease the tinnitus sound depending on the sound of the environment which enters the microphone. And then you also have the possibility to deactivate the hearing microphones. This can be very useful in case the client would only like to have a program without amplification, really only maybe an ocean sound, which he can activate when he would like to distract and to focus away from the tinnitus. So these are the two additional options which are available. What we want to do with tinnitus sound support, by no means we want to avoid that the tinnitus signal would be perceived stronger, that the tinnitus sound support could actually distress the client more. So we must be very, very careful with the maximum volume of the tinnitus sound. So there is an alert mechanism available in HearSuite, which means if the tinnitus sound increases a certain volume. Normally it's about 80 dB, but it also depends on the hearing loss of the client. Then a red bar will appear, and this is the maximum wearing time indicator. So there will be an alert that we must really be careful and look at the volume of the tinnitus sound support, and especially make sure that the client will not use the tinnitus program more than recommended in the end session screen. So this is very, very important that we counsel the client how long, how many hours per day the hearing aid user should use the tinnitus program. Now, if we have decided on a tinnitus program, maybe we have selected 2 or 3 different tinnitus programs which the client can change or activate whenever needed. Then we finish the session, and then in the finished session screen, now we can activate the tinnitus controls. So there is a special menu which says tinnitus controls, where we can activate the push button, how it also triggers the volume of the tinnitus. So first we would select the volume control range. Here below we see the volume control of the tinnitus. So be aware that this volume control would change the volume of the tinnitus sound and not the volume of the environment sound. You can also synchronize, very important also that we synchronize the volume control, that if the client would like to make the changes rapidly, he can do this irrelevant of the right or of the left hearing instrument. Very, very important that you will see below there is a comment which indicates for each tinnitus program how many hours the client can use or should use the tinnitus program at the maximum volume or at the starting volume. So it is important that the range of the volume control can actually influence also the usage time of the tinnitus sound support program. If the client cannot increase the volume that much, if you would reduce the volume control range, then the wearing time could actually be longer. If the volume control has a larger range, then normally the wearing control time will be less long. Clients with tinnitus can have good days and bad days. On bad days, they may require more relief sound for longer periods of time, and this can lead to larger risk of noise exposure. So therefore, again, it is very, very important to counsel our client how to use their tinnitus relief sound to avoid excessive noise exposure. So as I say, whenever this orange bar pops up, it's alert for us that we need to be careful with using tinnitus sound support and most importantly, giving the necessary instructions to the client. In the user guide for the client, there is a special page about tinnitus sound support. You as a hearing care professional, it's also your responsibility that you would hand over the user guide to the client, look up the page with tinnitus sound support, and there you will see the various listening programs. And there in each listening program, you should actually write down the time, maximum time of use for the tinnitus sound support. Now, if the client also needs amplification in the tinnitus program, it's a bit difficult to amplify amplification of the hearing instrument if the tinnitus sound is active, because then the client, he cannot really focus on what he hears because he would be distracted by the tinnitus noise. So if you need to adjust the amplification in the tinnitus program, it is actually possible to turn off the tinnitus sound support. And this you do simply in this icon. If you click on this icon here in the middle of the graph, in the Fit Hearing Instrument fine-tuning screen, you click on this and then tinnitus sound support will be deactivated. Now you have the possibility to adjust the amplification, and then when you have found the correct amplification and you would like to start again the tinnitus sound, then you just click again on the same icon and then the tinnitus sound will be activated again. Since recently, we have a great feature now also in the Philips HearLink 2 app, which means now the client, he can control also the tinnitus sound support sound with his app, and he can personalize it in many ways. So first of all, he has the possibility to change the tinnitus sound. So he can change the tinnitus sound binaurally, or he can change it monaurally, or he can also change the sound of the environment. If he would like to have the environment sound a bit louder or a bit softer, then he also can change the environment sound. Again, this is possible by monaurally or binaurally. Just a small remark that we have renamed actually one feature. Before, the sound tab was called reliever, tinnitus reliever, but now it has been changed to sound, but still it means it is the relieving sound. In addition, now you will find a new icon. and this new icon is actually the icon to activate Comfort Pulse. What is Comfort Pulse? I just explain you in a moment now. Comfort Pulse allows your client to adjust the modulation pattern of their tinnitus relief sound. So now with Comfort Pulse, the client can select from the 4 pulsation patterns, which we have also been seen in the software, which one he would like to listen to. Not only he can change the different patterns, he can change the rhythm, but he can actually also change the volume of this modulated sound. It's really, really nice. It's a very, very nice feature, and it is available not only for HearLink 50, but it is also available for HearLink 40. We will see here, if once the Comfort Pulse is open, then we see here the different menus. So either it can be off, here the pulsation would be off, it can be tranquil, it can be mild, it can be spirited, or it can be bustling. It is just important that the hearing care professional must have activated tinnitus sound support in HearSuite. Otherwise, of course, the client, he cannot just start and play around with it and select his own sound. But it is possible that if he has, you as the hearing care professional, maybe you have selected shape, then the client can easily change it and try out a different pattern. This is really, really nice and really can help the client to modify the sound, and especially also can avoid to visit you in the clinic too frequently to make some changes to his tinnitus sound. When is Comfort Pulse available? So you must have the latest firmware update. So if you do have HearLink hearing instruments in stock, then make sure they are upgraded to the latest version. So for HearLink 50, this would mean latest version is the recommended firmware 112. And for HearLink 40, you would need to upgrade to version 120. If you do not have the latest upgrades, then it will not appear. So maybe, yes, important that you bear this in mind. So I really think, tinnitus sound support is a really fantastic feature. Although, as Marielle also indicated, it's not a masking tool, and we do not want to mask the tinnitus, because it's extremely important, if you do not have to have a specialized masker, to really mask the sound your client is experiencing, but it can offer so much relief. You can distress, you can focus away from it. And tinnitus sound support, yes, it's a feature which is available in the software, so you can actually use it in the HearLink instrument whenever needed. It's really nice also to use it with a hearing aid, also like Marielle mentioned. Very, very frequently, clients then, when just using the hearing instrument, very, very frequently, they do not even need to activate the tinnitus sound support program. But with tinnitus sound support in Philips HearLink, we really have a brilliant solution, which I would like to motivate you. Try it out. You cannot lose anything. Try it out. And if the client would not accept it, then you still have the possibility not to use it. Okay, with this, I would like to hand back to Marielle, see if there are some questions.
Yes, thank you, Christina. That was a really very well thoroughly explained way of fitting the tinnitus sound support. And the more you're familiar with it, I think the easier it would be. So just feel free to try it out. we actually prepared some of more questions that you might find interesting. All right. This is probably something that a lot of you have been hearing from your clients. Does tinnitus ever go away? So, studies have actually indicated that even without any official treatment, the noises or the tinnitus sounds actually disappear or at least diminish in the majority of cases, since the brain loses interest and stops constantly monitoring the signal. And this process is actually called habituation, which can take anywhere from several months to years. But hopefully, this is important in setting a somehow positive and realistic expectation, because as we know, tinnitus is actually highly individual. What's important is, of course, not to make it worse and cause emotional stress. And you can do this by making sure that you provide support and understanding to your client, proper information, and also counseling, and proper referral in case there are some red flags, which suggests a potential underlying medical condition. And if we look at the first point, you should try to basically put yourself in the client's shoes and understand that tinnitus can be really emotionally distressing, especially when they first start hearing it. And this is commonly because of a lot of misconceptions as to the cause, the prognosis, the management of tinnitus. So just do your best. Try to be as supportive and understanding as you can, and this is really useful. And then the second point here is proper information and counseling. For those suffering from tinnitus, I think there is a general feeling that they're not really taken seriously. They are often told, it's not serious, there's no cure, just live with it. And normally that's what they hear. And this is true to a certain extent, but as a hearing care professional, it is your responsibility to educate them on the basics of tinnitus, what it is, how it happens, the common symptoms, and the many solutions that are actually available, because there is a lot. And then lastly, proper referral in case of an underlying medical conditions. Again, it is your responsibility to have a list of red flags that prompts a referral to the ENT doctor. So you have to, in case, for example, they are really, you can see that they have a lot of cognitive and mental issues because of a tinnitus, then refer them to a psychiatrist. If it's, for example, a roaring kind of tinnitus or a very throbbing kind of tinnitus, then probably it's a vascular issue. Refer this to the ENT doctor. Or if there are other symptoms like vestibular or balance issues, again, refer them to the doctor because a tinnitus could be a symptom of something more serious. And but for the rest of the people, as we all know, it's really important to tell them that the same way as we ignore the other regular sounds of our daily life, if there are no red flags, tinnitus is usually more the emotional reaction versus the actual sound. So it's very important to separate these two things. Okay, the next question is, what are 5 questions, and very important ones, that you can start asking the client who has bothersome tinnitus? Of course, you can ask your client, how long have you had it for? When is your tinnitus at its worst? So this will help you look for triggers that might exacerbate the tinnitus. Where can you hear it? Do you hear it inside the head, only on the right ear, on both ears? What does a tinnitus sound like? And of course, the most important thing is the impact it's actually having on your client. So you can assess this and see how severe it is, because how the client perceives a tinnitus is not dependent on how loud the tinnitus is. It can be a really mild tinnitus, but they are super bothered by it. So it's important to know how affected they are. And then aside from using hearing aids, what are the other sounds that I can suggest to my client to help ensure this habituation process? Of course, you have the sound therapy or sound enrichment. They're the same. And basically, that's using any sound to reduce tinnitus awareness and distress. And of course, whenever you ask your client to choose a sound, the qualities that they should look for is to make sure that the sound is actually very pleasant to listen to and not too distracting. So, for example, going outside for a walk in nature or even the office sounds, that can be really good. Oops. And the other potential sound sources, of course, they include all of these. You can buy it on Amazon for very specific sound machines that they can put on their bedside table. They can use apps using their phones. CDs or MP3s, I guess for most of us, it's more streaming. So Spotify, podcast, they can even do that. And natural sounds. What is important is, again, make sure that whatever relief sounds your client is using, they should make sure that the volume is actually slightly quieter than their tinnitus level. So they should still hear the tinnitus a little bit in order for habituation to happen and they can get used to tinnitus. Because if this tinnitus relief sound is covering the whole tinnitus, then habituation will be less likely to happen. Okay, so we might go a bit over time, so feel free to go if you need to, but I have 5 more common misconceptions with regards to tinnitus, which you might hear a lot from your clients. So this is the first question, true or false? Tinnitus usually improves on its own through a process called habituation. So the answer to that is it's true, because with habituation, the brain eventually stops monitoring the tinnitus over time. So this tinnitus even disappears completely, or it at least reduces to a tolerable level in most cases. And of course, the length of time really varies depending on the person, but it does happen. And one of the best ways to achieve habituation is, of course, to use sound therapy or sound enrichment. Second, true or false question. Tinnitus is a disease which will make you go deaf. So the answer to that is false. Tinnitus is not a disease. While we do not know the exact causes of tinnitus, of course, there are a lot of common causes, like, any issues with the ear, or it could be hearing loss, could be aging, it could be anything. We know that it is not a disease in itself, nor is it an illness. Tinnitus is more a symptom, but often many people commonly confuse tinnitus as being the cause of an underlying condition. Although tinnitus usually comes with hearing loss, these two do not always come together. So whatever is causing your tinnitus could be a lot of different things. Make sure you just do a more thorough case history, proper evaluation, and counseling when you have a client who asks you this kind of question. So assurance, counseling, information is really vital in this case. Next, hearing aids will always fix my hearing and tinnitus. If your client has this belief, please correct it immediately, because this statement is false. Hearing aids will, of course, help with the hearing, and well-fitted hearing aids can definitely reduce the client's perceived tinnitus. With that in mind, they are not magic wands, because you do need to make sure that you adjust and tweak the settings over time to make sure that it suits the client in a way that works best for them. So this is a case-to-case basis. We can expect alleviation of the tinnitus symptom, but we cannot promise that it will fix or cure their tinnitus. So be careful with this. Our second to last question is, there is no tinnitus cure that works for everyone. That is true. There is no tinnitus cure that works for everyone. Even though there is no magic pill to cure tinnitus, there are still many things people can do to help with their tinnitus that will over time reduce the effect that it has over the client's daily life. And although there's no simple cure, it is possible for them to reach a point where they can't hear it as loudly as they used to be, and it won't bother them as much as it used to be. And as a hearing care professional, it's really important to give them this hope, as long as you make sure that there's no medical issues that could be causing the tinnitus. And then this is actually our last question for today. True or false? The two most effective treatments for tinnitus, according to scientific studies, are hearing aids and cognitive behavioral therapy. So the answer to that is true, because even though there is probably so many treatments out there that you've heard of, which is a cure for tinnitus, like neuromonic sound therapy or linear, which is this bimodal stimulation device using the tongue, or even tinnitus retraining therapy, acupuncture, pills, B12 vitamins, or whatever dietary supplements you might have heard of. Most of these things actually have no or limited evidence that it is effective. Even sound therapy shows only some evidence that it's effective, because there's actually no golden standard for sound therapy that works for everyone. So that's why what we do know is that the two of the most effective treatments, which have a lot of research and a lot of new papers behind it, include hearing aids and cognitive behavioral therapy. And probably you guys already know this, but when I talk about cognitive behavioral therapy, it basically uses a series of techniques such as relaxation, imagery, and challenging the beliefs of a person regarding their tinnitus. So later on, I'll put that link in the follow-up email that we will be putting in. And I'll show you also a resource that I think will be helpful for you and your client. So this is actually the website of the British Tinnitus Association. They rebranded. It's now called Tinnitus UK. And basically, if they have a section here called tinnitus treatments. So they look at two things. Is it safe and is it effective? And if I choose safe and evidence that it is effective and try to filter it out of all of these potential treatments, so we have like 6-7 pages all in all, you will see that the two proven options are actually hearing aids and cognitive behavioral therapy. There's also other things. Hearing aids is one. If you actually click on this one, it would show you this page, and it would show you what it is, whether it's safe, whether it's effective, and a lot of descriptions and the research behind it. So if you want to have more evidence, this is really a good website because it's always updated. And all of the studies that they did proving that it is well evidenced is here. And you can always download more information that shows you that. For example, so that's the case with hearing aids and cognitive behavioral therapy. With tinnitus retraining therapy, you can see that it is regarded as safe. Efficacy, it has limited evidence. So that was really interesting for me because I had this impression that, you know, it was one of the gold standards. But apparently, although tinnitus retraining therapy is very influential, the research behind it does not reach a critical mass. So it's not proven 100% that it will work for most people. So this is something, if you click on that and download that paper, you would see all of the information that you need to, if you recommend something, then it's actually evidence-based. So that is one solution I can recommend. Another is the e-learning course. So this e-learning course is really interesting. If you want to refresh your knowledge on tinnitus, you can just click on this to find out more. It will ask you to register. And once you register, you will have a link that will let you access the e-learning course. So this is what it looks like. Let me just show you what it looks like. This is the page where you will see 9 modules. So you have the introduction, what is tinnitus, etc., etc. And overall, I think this will take around 1 to 2 hours. And it's really a good review. It will take you through different things, some facts and figures, very interactive sections. And of course, the more you're comfortable with tinnitus, the more you can also counsel your clients much more effectively. So these are some of the things. There's also videos that you can play, and it really gets right down to the basics of tinnitus and all of the research done in the last 10, 15 years regarding tinnitus. So these I definitely recommend, and the link is, it will follow in the email that I will send you afterwards. So if you did not register, if you just received this webinar link from your colleague, make sure that you register next time so I can send the follow-up email to you. All right. So those are the 2 resources that you will receive the link to later. But yeah, I think that's mostly it. We don't have any more questions, I guess. So guys, thank you for hanging on. We really appreciate your time and attention. Christina, would you like to say anything else?
Yeah, no question. No, thank you very much, Marielle. So thank you very much for the link for the website, because I think it's really cool. If you are interested to know a bit more about tinnitus, then you can find all this information there on the UK tinnitus website. And yeah, it's really nice. So I hope that this will be useful for you as well. Although I know normally there is not so much time available for additional studies, but you have the link. So yeah, have a look and see what you find.
Bye, guys.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.